Hey everyone, Rho here. Today we're discussing the recovery of the Blood Angels chapter. As the focus of the Imperium Nihilus, just what kind of position are they in? General spoiler warning to begin, the events we'll be discussing today are from across the Warhammer 40k universe, so you have been warned. But, with that said, let's just jump straight in. Okay. Now, seeing as we discussed the strength of the Space Wolves the other day, I thought it was only right to take a trip across the Cicatrix Maledictum and discuss how the Blood Angels are getting on. And to be honest, I really wanted to do this because my mind's really been stuck on just why the Space Wolves receive such a heavy reinforcement of numbers, whereas the Blood Angels apparently haven't. Now we're going to discuss the grudge between Logan Grimnar and the returned Primarch Guilliman later in the week, because that's a fascinating topic in itself. But, as we've seen, the Space Wolves apparently were bolstered by thousands of new Primaris recruits, really bringing them back to the strength of old, if not perhaps even greater than they've ever been as a chapter. And this was done to aid the Space Wolves in countering a very significant threat of the Orcs. However, regardless of how perilous a position the Wolves may have been in, it's pretty hard to say the Blood Angels weren't in the worst one of all. The story of Guilliman's arrival to the Blood Angels' homeworld is, I'm fairly sure, a well-known tale by now. The threat of High Fleet Leviathan had forced the Blood Angels to call together all the successor chapters of their Primarch, and together in a valiant defense against the full force of the Tyranids, the Sons of Sanguinius managed to save their world from complete annihilation, with Guilliman's Indomitus fleet arriving in the final stages, wiping out the weakened Tyranid threat that remained. And if you know about that but have never experienced the story, then definitely do yourself a favour and go back and check out the Devastation of Baal novel. It's been out for a few years now, but it's definitely one of my absolute favourite reads still to this day. And I do think there's a good chance we may see these events covered again, but from Guilliman's fleet perspective in later novels, as the tale of the Indomitus Crusade unravels in the Dawn of Fire series. Now, that aside, of course in the aftermath of this event, Guilliman further added to Chapter Master Dante's burdens, appointing him Warden of all of Imperium Nihilus, Dante now becoming responsible for all of the Imperium's forces north of the Great Rift. But with this almighty appointment, what of the chapter itself? Well, obviously with the arrival of Guilliman and the Indomitus fleet, the rebuilding of not only the chapter, but the Baal system began. We know from Guilliman's own words in meeting with Dante that he had enough Primaris to not only rebuild the Blood Angels chapter, but all the Sons of the Blood. Every Blood Angel's successor was brought back to full strength with the new Primaris recruits from the Indomitus fleet. And immediately there, I think this is one of the best pieces of evidence in why the Blood Angels perhaps have not received the Space Wolves treatment, so to speak. The grudge of Grimnar and the independence of the Wolves, of course, is most likely the main reason. However, it does have to be said, the Blood Angels were also not alone when Guilliman arrived at Baal. Guilliman didn't arrive to find a single chapter needing to be rebuilt. He arrived to find, aside from a few specific cases, every single successor chapter of the Blood Angels. And every single one of them was absolutely devastated. There was less than 300 Marines left alive within the Blood Angels chapter themselves, for example, and this was replicated across all of the successors. Yet despite this, every single one was replenished to a man. So in actual fact, Guilliman most likely gave far more Primaris recruits to rebuilding the Sons of Sanguinius than he maybe did the single Space Wolves chapter. It was just spread across all of the chapters. And of course it does have to be said, the Blood Angels, aside from a few deviances, such as the Sanguinary Guard and the Death Company, have always been a fairly loyal Codex chapter, as far as we know, never exceeding the 1,000 Marine total. In all likelihood, Guilliman maybe had no intention of changing that anyway. But considering Dante was appointed Warden, why wouldn't Guilliman ensure the Blood Angels were a fighting force without peer? Well, I do believe Guilliman had to be very careful with his appointing of Dante as Warden. Even though he's not from his own lineage, he is still a Space Marine. Had Guilliman made Dante Warden and then bolstered the Blood Angels to a nigh-on legion, I think that could have caused shockwaves of concern throughout the power bases of the Imperium. And honestly, I think we may see the appointment cause ripples anyway, if we do get to see it covered within the Dawn of Fire series at a later date. We've already seen Colquhoun make a comment about an empire of angels across the Great Rift to Guilliman. The political game within the Imperium is a very dangerous one, and Guilliman, despite being the Lord Commander and returned Primarch, is mistrusted at every step. I don't foresee Dante's appointment going down well, even though he is perhaps the greatest hero alive, aside from Guilliman himself. However, with all those political games in mind, what Guilliman did ensure was that the Blood Angels' homeworld would become a bastion of the Imperium. Their fallen flagships were lifted from the blasted sands in ruins and dragged back into the void to be rebuilt anew. The Blood Angels' fortress monastery of the Arx Angelicum to be greater than it had ever been previously. The Blood Angels' space dock of the Skyfall was to be built and upgraded to house a fleet large enough to defend the entire Imperium Nihilus, or perhaps I should say reclaim it. So it's undoubtable the Blood Angels have received a great boost in their strength. It just hasn't come in force of numbers. Perhaps the most important topic, however, is the character of Dante himself, a far different man than Logan Grimnar. By the very nature of Grimnar and the Wolves, it is in them to stand apart from the Imperium, to be that executioner should the need ever arise. And as that lone guard against corruption, they have no other in which they could truly depend. Everything lay on their shoulders, and as such they only had their own strength in which to rely. For the Blood Angels, this was never the case. They were always very much a part of the Imperium. There is most likely no hero as venerated as much as Dante, and so Dante never felt his burden in the same way as Grimnar. Undoubtedly, the best evidence of that difference is as the Blood Angels' fleet is being repaired, the Blood Angels would soon be faced with the prospect of having 3 battle barges within their chapter, an almighty number for any one single chapter. I have no doubt the Wolves of Russ would have gladly accepted that within their chapter. However, instead with Dante, knowing that his chapter could barely have the manpower to crew it, rather than keeping it within his own chapter, Dante hands it over to another Blood Angel successor. 2 different chapter masters moulded by their situation and moulded by their nature. So at the end of the day, in actual fact, while the Blood Angels themselves may not have the sheer strength as a chapter as the Space Wolves, they have in fact received perhaps even more of a boost in strength than Grimnar and the Space Wolves did. It's just spread across all the sons of Sanguinius rather than themselves. Maybe that's the understated greatest strength that Guilliman brings to this new darkened Imperium. He understands not only his enemy, but also his allies. He knows how to not only interact with them, but also how to use them, how best to harness their natures, the natures of his brothers of old. For the sons of Russ, he had to contend with their independence and harness their strength accordingly. For the angels of Sanguinius, it was the son who walked in his Primarch's shadow, and the brotherhood of all the sons of his bloodline. Two different chapters with two very different natures. But as always guys, what do you think? Was it easier for Guilliman to give the Space Wolves such a huge amount of Primaris due to their nature and role of executioners, keeping them apart from the Imperium? Or was it simply a matter of circumstances? And in regards to the Blood Angels, is it simply a case of rather than finding one chapter in need of repair, he found all of the successors together? Or will we maybe one day find out that the game of Imperium politics became much more relevant in that situation? As always, leave your thoughts in the comments below, I love to read them. Huge thank you to all my subscribers, your support truly means a lot to me, it really does. And if you're new, please consider subscribing to help the channel grow. And if you enjoyed this particular vid, then why not drop a like on it too. But with that said, I am off, and I'll see you all again real soon.